Just before we get into the main episode, a quick message from a friend of OnFARM recorded in her tractor cab.
Hello, my name is Katie Brisbane and I am a project coordinator for RET, the Royal Highland Education Trust. We work to give children a greater understanding of food, farming and the countryside. This year we have a focus on the journey of food, seeds and grains, highlighting all the great things produced by Scotland's soils. If you're a farmer or work in a rural business and you'd like to get involved, to volunteer or sponsor our work, we'd love to hear from you. We also have a huge range of educational resources on the website. If you know any teachers or educators who might appreciate them, you can find out more at www.red.org.uk.
Good morning, sheep fans. Cammie's the name, sheep's the game. I'm a 31-year-old sheep farmer from southwest Scotland. I'm based here in Ayrshire, running about 1,000 sheep total, and I have a YouTube channel that's all about sheep called The Sheep Game.
What a way to start the show. That was Cammie Wilson with his introduction that he would normally give to his YouTube films. He's quite a famous YouTube influencer now, is Cammie, and I'm delighted that he's going to join me for this podcast, alongside Marion McCormick, Neil White and Rory Christie.
What is absolutely at the root of good health is good food, and food is effectively medicine. You attach the relevance of what British Scottish farming does to that well-being of our nation, then you build a nation from the ground up, literally from farming up to having good well-being.
I think at the moment the uncertainty, I would say more than the weather in the market, it's actually everybody's sort of asking, well, where are we going with this? And I think we have to, they say about trees, putting the right tree in the right place. Well, I actually think farming's about that. It's about putting the right crop or the right animal in the right place.
We should have a national food strategy map. We have a network that can take our primary produce, have it converted and be sold locally. I firmly believe that's the way, in terms of local markets, local miles, and we've got the potential to do that.
I'm just running about doing the things I do anyway whilst holding the camera, and people seem to enjoy it. I contract shear, and at the moment I'm just in the door actually contract scanning, pregnancy scanning for sheep. Before this I was a police officer for 12 years. If I'm honest, it's thanks to the YouTube thing that I was able to resign from the police in October and just focus on being a sheep farmer, because this additional support that comes from the YouTube thing helps keep the farming side of things going, because I'll rent about 1,000 acres here in Ayrshire, and being totally honest, you couldn't make that pay. My accountant calls me a busy fool, which will not be far wrong.
It's Monty here for this episode, as you probably guessed. The whole evening when we recorded this just turned into a chat about the really pertinent issues in Scottish farming. So I hope you enjoy it. You might not hear very much from me. I'm going to really let you just listen to what our guests had to say.
Hello everybody, I'm Marion McCormick. I hail from Oban, Argyll. I was a buyer with Aldi for nearly 20 years. I'm now on the Scotland Food and Drink Board and do a lot of work with the RET organisation in Scotland, and co-own a small confectionery company out of Glasgow, which I'm glad to say is furnished with British sugar beets, British dairy products, and I'm delighted to be here with you all.
I'm Neil White. I'm farm at Greennow Farm. My great-grandfather came into Greennow Farm in 1913. We were fishermen and butchers, and then we took over the farm as tenants. And then through the years we bought this farm and another small acreage that we used to rent from my uncle. So we farm combinable crops, oats for Quaker, barley for beer and whiskey, and then wheat, which quite a lot gets made into spirit, and then animal feed and Nahayarisic oilseed rape.
You're going to be our arable guru in this panel. I better turn to my last guest. We've had him on the programme before, so you listeners will be kind of familiar with Mr. Christie. But Rory, you better give a wee bit of an introduction, please.
Yeah, an introduction. I was thinking about that. Who am I? What am I? I'm a dairy farmer first and foremost, and a pig farmer. Though in truth be told, my brother's the pig farmer and a very good one at it. I farm 1,050 spring calving cows in southwest Scotland, and I'm third generation. We've been through the cycle of a rough ride, and we've reinvested in our business, and hopefully it's future fit. I'm also, because I'm a super cooperator, I guess, and I'm now vice chair of SOS. And I also founded a little co-op called the Milk Supply Association, which looks after all the farmers who supply the Lactalis owned factory in Stranraer, where we all make cheese. And if I'm allowed to plug Seriously Strong in Galloway, then that's what our milk goes to do. I'm also a trained mediator, a conflict mediator. I suppose you might wonder what on earth is he doing that for. And it's because there is so much conflict in agriculture, and I actually initially did it to improve my negotiating skills, and I found that in reality what I needed to do was improve my listening skills. So that's me.
Great stuff. So we've heard a wee bit there from everyone, and I'm delighted we've got them all on board. I guess really there's so much we could discuss, and I kind of narrowed it down, if you want to call it that, or maybe widened it out to a look ahead to where we might be as an industry, where you might be as individual businesses 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I'm quite interested in the contrast between what Neil said and what Cammy said to start off with. You know, Neil, you said something like 1913 or something you've been on the farm since, is that right?
Not personally. I feel like that sometimes, but no. Yes, I did. And actually, you know, I've watched Cammy's videos, and he is very, very good at it. And it's a funny thing, because I was almost going to take that out of my introduction, because I actually think it's more commendable what he's done. Coming in as a new entrant must be incredibly difficult, and when you listen to what he's done, it is very commendable. You know, I take my hat off to him, because I've not been in that situation. I started from a very different point. I mean, that's just the cards I was dealt, and I've still probably trying to do the same as him, trying to grow my business and trying to keep it relevant to what people are looking for. But yeah, I'm probably 100 years ahead.
Yeah, at least. But no, I appreciate that, Neil. Nice of you to say, but you're bang on. Like, although we're at very different stages, we're both trying to do the same thing. I imagine we're all trying to do the same thing. And like, for me, like, I've been very lucky. I know I've been lucky because, well, partly the area I'm in Ayrshire, grass here is cheaper than, you know, probably up Perth way or Fife. You know, you're trying to get into farming there. I believe it's a bit more expensive to buy, you know, to rent ground. So I'm fortunate that way. I'm fortunate that through sheep shearing and the networking that provides, I've been made aware or came across opportunities that have set me up really well. For me, it's like I'm right into like perspective of all these things. Like, I could look at somebody like yourself, right, as farming, and I'm at, he's so lucky, you know, he's got a farm and he's got all this stuff and stuff. But then there'll be somebody 5 years younger than me looking at me going, oh, he's got all these sheep and he's got, like, and I wish I was like that. So it's all about perspective, you know. There's always somebody looking like, I wish I had 1,000 acres or whatever to farm, but it's all about your own situation, and you've just got to keep pushing forward, and that's the fun of it for me. Like,
go back to what you said earlier, though, and you've mentioned the figure a couple of times, 1,000 acres, and you know, we're not on this programme to be the typical moaning farmers, but you did say 1,000 acres, and even at that, it wouldn't make a living without your YouTubing. Do you want to just give that a little bit of sort of further kick around explanation?
So my type of farming isn't really a fair representation. Like, I'm a real believer, like, my system, I'm not saying it's unusual because there's a lot of people, but to have 1,000 acres all in seasonal lets, like none of it's fixed for more than 12 months ahead, means you're paying a bit more. So I think it's fairly understandable that you're not going to make, you know, money out of that, really. That said, if lamb prices stay the way they are, I do believe I'll do quite well next year. Because I've nearly doubled the breeding sheep, so I think I'll be okay next year, and it will make a turn. But my thinking behind it is, it's not about making money, or this side of my farming business isn't about making money just now. It's about building a stock of ewes, so that if I get an opportunity, like a good friend just got a 20-year lease on Isle of Bute, a 1,400-acre farm through the Mount Stewart Trust, which is a fantastic opportunity. Emma Gray got another farm just along the road from him, a similar opportunity, 700 acres. So if the chance comes for this and I'm doing an application, it's like, right, here's my 850 breeding sheep bought and paid. They're there ready to move on to an opportunity when it comes. So if I can keep that all ticking over, and my shearing and my scanning keeps the lights on and keeps everything else ticking over, then I'm quite happy. I'm falling into this kind of position of, I want to say, like a typical farmer, but like, I love what I do. Like, when I left the police last year, I'm 31-year-old, but I said to my girlfriend when I left, like, I genuinely feel like I'll never work another day in my life. If I can make enough money to pay my pickup, feed the ewes and keep the house going, I sound like such an old-fashioned farmer saying that, but my mindset's totally changed over the years, because when I first started in the police, we didn't have sheep. My dad was a shepherd, and he sort of pushed me this way of, there's no money in being a shepherd, which he's quite right. It's a lifestyle thing, go and do something else. So I became a police officer because SNP were like, we're desperate, we need 1,000 new cops, we'll let him in. So 18-year-old, I went straight out of school and joined the police. It was a different mindset. It was, you have to get the nice car on a finance deal, you have to buy the nice house and pay a dear mortgage, and then you need Fred Perry gear or whatever the fancy gear is these days. Like, it's weird. Where it's like, and I genuinely, I mean this, I'm wearing a pair of tracksuit bottoms just now because I'm scanning every day with my joggies. I've been wearing them since the 3rd of January, every day. Like, and if that isn't just the way to live your life, like, what a great lifestyle that is.
I think it's great to hear someone living life and being so enthusiastic about agriculture, but I think Rory might have a challenge about that, because Rory...
I don't have a challenge. I think what I would say is, I think the key thing, I heard you say it really early on, is that it's fun. And you're asking us tonight, Monty, what is the future? Well, unless the future's fun, nobody's going to want to do it. We talk about the well-being of the nation, and we talk about everybody having a right to a really good well-being. And if you're having fun, then there's a fair chance your well-being's pretty good. And we need to make well-being for farming, it needs to be fun. And why is it fun? Because actually, Cammy, you're making a pound. You're making a pound and you're growing your business, and your business model is different, okay? And the different bit of your business model is your creativity with your YouTube, and that needs to grow, and you need to be proud of that and not ashamed of that. Is absolutely part of your model, and we need to create that innovation throughout many areas of what we're doing in agriculture. And if we can have that glass half full attitude that you have, then we will succeed. We also need our government to put in an environment, or help put an environment in place that allows us to take opportunities. Use our glass half full attitude to innovate and take opportunity. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to happen to make us have fun, or to allow us to have fun.
I think it's quite good when you get people like Cammy, and my son follows Ollie blogs, and he has a huge following, and when you get people who are genuinely living it and doing it, there's a different sort of feel to those sort of videos. It's not talking at you, it's just taking you through the process, warts and all, and I think that kind of approach, you can't fake that, and you can't buy that. You couldn't put together a production company to make that as well as it's made, just warts and all, and I think these people are actually encouraging more new entrants than any kind of other program probably could. And when I say program, I don't just mean TV or radio, I mean legislative program. I think people see that and sort of see it might be attainable, and it might be something that you might enjoy.
Oh, not Neil, just when you're saying about TV, but I totally think, yeah, that there's so many young people coming through, and social media is such a good way to get to young farmers. I think we almost, and you guys will know better than me, but I think we almost had this wee generation gap where people probably just slightly older than myself, where it was like, go off farm, be a lawyer, be a doctor, get a profession as such, a qualification. But especially in the light of COVID and over recent years, folk have realised actually, see, working an office job 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, whatever the crazy hours are, commuting, living in the town, that environment all close together, actually that's not that great a lifestyle. It also helps that farming is probably in a better place just now, again, will keep me right here, than it maybe was, 15, 20 years ago, in terms of like people can work in farming or take on the farm and look to have a bright future and build things and move it forward. An example I use is, and I don't like to run it, BBC Farming Life. Now, great show, it's a good show to look at, but I just find it very negative to watch. I just find and I don't want to upset anybody here, but there's always somebody greeting about how hard it is and how there's no money in it. And I'm thinking, see, as a young person watching that, why would I want to be a farmer? Everybody's upset, they're not making money. It's like, whereas I'd like to be like, you can make enough to get by, but it's a lifestyle.
And Marion, you've been the other side of the fence, as you put it. As a buyer, as a supermarket buyer, even as a consumer, should they get away with sort of paying less, as it were, just because actually, do you know what? We can get away with it because these guys that are producing this stuff, well, they're enjoying it, they're having fun, so they're going to take less for their produce.
Absolutely not. I'm just listening along to Cammy and thinking about, all the things I do marketing wise or have done in the past. He's absolutely, he's talking to a new audience that, just in general, the farming stakeholders, quangos, government policy are not really talking to too much. And I think they're carving out their own way of creating a lifestyle. And thinking of consumers, you have to think of housewives and whatever demographic you might want to think about. There is a cohort of millennials that come through that have got a whole different value base from any of us in this call, except for Cammy potentially. Sorry, I know I look younger than I am. They think differently, and their value base is more about, the well-being of the animals, or where it comes from, or that those people are looking after where or they're building communities, or these things are hugely valuable, and I think that that's got a place when it comes to finally positioning your product and getting it where it wants to go. I do think, though, my words of wisdom are you've got to think where your product's going. And I was reading about Neil, just about how you pitch your products, and I think you've thought quite carefully about where your market is, and I do think that's something you have to be alive to. But in general, broadly, I think it's brilliant. It's free advertising, it's free PR, it's going to be the lifeblood of the industry, and diversification is a word in farming. Loads of people are doing different things, and it's like having a separate service industry that's just, you don't actually have to have infrastructure, you don't have to, you have to have a camera and just be yourself and sell it, and it's brilliant.
Neil, because these guys are having fun at it, they're enjoying that lifestyle, they're not looking for the Fred Perry and what have you, as Cammy said, then we can take the piss a little bit on price. That's maybe how it feels, no?
Well, it maybe feels like that, but I don't think that comes about because we're actually enjoying ourselves. I've been in environments with lots of people who run businesses, and like everybody else here. And, fighting a farming corner, I just used to say, well, I run a micro business. I run a small business. That's what I run. It's a family-run business, like lots of businesses you'll maybe see in your local town, the shops and various different things. So I run one of those. I have the same problems, cash flow, markets, all these sort of things that they have too. So I think farming's in a strange situation too, where we have this balance of subsidy being used sort of almost against us. Well, you're getting a subsidy so we can pay you, and we give away a lot of data. I think people can calculate our cost of production because we have volunteered quite a lot of that data, and we're maybe just a bit slow to that side of things, and it'll come again on the carbon side as well, and the biodiversity side. There's going to be these audits, and who's going to hold that information, and what are they going to do with it? I'm very wary of that coming in. I can see why it has to happen, and I actually think Scottish farming is in an amazing position if we can get the right way of calculating that. I would like to see a world standard for that, and I tell you, I think if they had that, Scotland would be right up there, and we could actually use it to market our produce rather than to beat us with it. I feel we seem to be a bit scared of that, and I as an arable farmer, I'm a bit scared of it because I'm a bit worried how they calculate it. And all the different things I've heard from various different farmers with all these different numbers, none of them are very favourable until you speak to, there's a couple of people who I've spoken to who are trading carbon, and they've got a different company. And they're coming out carbon positive. And my situation at the moment, I would probably be carbon positive, but most of the ones in Scotland who would calculate it would put me the other way. So, I think there's going to be a great opportunity there, but I hope it doesn't dilute down like the other opportunities. As I said, and everybody here is probably producing a product that the customer actually really wants. And I'm beer and whiskey and spirit and oats and, but I don't get a massive, my dad probably got as much for the malt and barley 20 years ago almost. It's always just enough.
You did some figures. Did you have some figures, is that right, about the treasury and, how much the return on a hectare of barley brings into the treasury?
Yeah, well, I had Mary Goujon down on farm, and she was kind enough to come down, and it was just myself and my son who spoke to her. And just as she looked round the farm very briefly, but as she was leaving, I had a kilo of wheat in a bag. And I said, well, you hold that. And I said, if that's going to go away, and if it goes to grants, it gets turned into spirit. And I said, you potentially can get £4.20 in duty for that kilo of wheat. I said, I get 20 pence. And I said, do you know how much that costs in subsidy to produce? And it was less than a penny. So I was saying, there's a good income there for the government. There's a good income. I'm squeezing a small margin out of my bit. But we put a lot back for that subsidy. If we're talking about public good, even in that small way, I know it's predominantly environmental that will really be pushed on, but we are putting quite a lot back in there. It was something tremendous. I think it was about 8 nurses' wages per hectare. It was a colossal figure, which is something that we could mention a bit more.
It does seem that we haven't done a very good job in marketing, and we don't as a nation, really. I've watched the Kiwis and I watched the Irish already come out and say we're going to be net zero by X. And the Kiwis just changed the metrics to make sure they would be, and they changed the time scale as well, and their government backed them, because the government values the exports and values the sales. At the same time, we haven't got somebody, putting these statements like you've just made, these numbers, into language that people can understand. And it's marketing. And we need to do more and more of that, and maybe Cami and his cohort of younger people who are good at communicating that worth, that benefit, that value that Scotland is bringing and Scotland's farmers are bringing. We need to look at a new way of delivering that value. I totally agree with you on all the stuff about data. When I did the work on, I was part of one of the farmer-led groups for climate change, and there's 14 different tools to carbon footprint. I called for, and I'm calling for, one national system to carbon audit, and I would say for a national data steward as well. I think we actually have one, and people don't realise how many people in the beef and sheep and the red meat industry don't realise that Scotty ID is farmer owned. They think it's a government quango. Scotty ID is owned by the members of SOS, which are all cooperative farming members, and it's a massive data holder and data steward. It can keep our data safe and analyse it and mine it. And we need to do the same with our natural capital. And we need to bring all of these things together to make it the metrics that we can use to promote, not defend, promote what the good stuff that our industry does. That's the kind of thing we need to use to make farming in 20 years' time successful.
Cami, how ready do you think your audience is for a little bit more of the sort of policy and, almost maybe come across as a bit of a moaning farmer type thing, but how ready do you think that kind of wider audience that you're now attracting is, especially as you say in the States and what have you? How ready are they to hear about, Scotland and the success of our agricultural industry as a carbon sink, etc.?
Yeah, I'm just the whole the moaning farmer thing. I just try to see. I like what Rory touched on. It's like not about defending what you do; it's about promoting. If you're going to promote something, you need positivity. Moving forward in the future, if using the platform to spread this stuff, I think it has to be a bit, rather than, like, I see a lot of people on social media, they'll have a go at vegans and stuff like that, and I'm just like, it's just negativity with negativity. It's like, I just don't feel it does anybody any good, like those kind of arguments. We should be more like, here's our Scotch lamb running on grass on the hills here in Ayrshire, or mostly nice lush pastures here in Ayrshire, but on the pastures here in Ayrshire, it's a great product, grass reared Scotch lamb and beef of course as well, but I'm just speaking from the point of view of lamb. It's a great product and we just need to keep that positive message going. One aspect I look at things, and I don't know a lot about, I don't really get, I get a small bit of subsidy from a bit of rent from the forestry, so I don't really know much about subsidies and things like people running farming business would know. Does that hinder you, or does that? I would say perhaps that actually helps you. It's probably helped you establish a business
on its own merit.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, and that, like, I'm not worried about, and I don't want to offend. I always watch what I say because I don't want it to sound like, oh, it's all right for him to say, is the kind of saying. But like, I'm not worried about what happens to the subsidies as such because it doesn't really affect me, so I don't comment on it. But I know there'll be farmers out there that if it changes the wrong way, they'll be crushed. And we talk about mental well-being and stuff in farming. Finance is like the biggest pressure on any of us. You know, you get relationships and other things that cause stress and pressure, but finance is the massive one in society in general. You just need to look at like the heating bills, the gas price. That's wild. The pressure that'll put on people and the poorest people. But going on a wee tangent there. But so I don't really like commenting on things like to do with subsidies because it doesn't affect me and it's just not my place to speak on it. But I do believe that if we're going to be promoting farming and stuff, it's just focus on the positives. I really like that phrase. It's not about defending what we do, it's about promoting what we do. That was a great phrase, actually. I'm going to use that one and pretend it's my own.
See, it was the Dairy Ninja that gave you. So it's all fine, and let's be positive, okay? I'm not a moaning farmer, I never have been. I've taken the challenge on and absolutely listened to the signals, and I took it on the chin and I took it personally. Farmers aren't any good at business. And so I became good at business, and I've invested and I've turned the thing around. But I can still tell you, it's really hard. It's really hard to make money, and we shouldn't deny that. And that's not moaning. It's just really hard to make money. And I take subsidy. I get about 130,000 quid a year, and I need every single penny of it because I've invested, and I've got 20-year debt because I've invested to meet compliance, to increase my production, to be technically brilliant, because that's what you need to be. You need to be technically efficient, technically excellent. And I've done all those things. And the compliance is getting tougher and tougher and tougher. And the value I'm still getting, relatively speaking, the same milk price and the pig price. And with the greatest respect, having done it, my grandfather was extremely successful, built up from nothing, and then I had to rebuild the castle. So it's much harder to knock a castle down and then rebuild it. Get rid of all the historic nonsense. You can't. Everything to you is fresh, and I'm not knocking at all. What you're doing is amazing, but for an awful lot of people that are farming at the moment,
no,
and that's
totally
why I'm
agree.
saying it needs to be fun. For an awful lot of them, it's not, and it's very hard, and they're very worried about the future because there's no vision as to what it's going to be like. And yeah, we could do a whole bunch of people maybe to leave industry and make some space for new folk who can give new ideas and put new life into our industry. But there is no doubt when you go to negotiate that milk price, and I do it on a monthly business, it's extremely hard to get money out of the market. And in the milk market, the world global supply just needs to move 3 or 4% supply and demand, and it makes it for a good year to a terrible year. At the moment, we're running the country, the world's running 4% under, and milk prices are going up. But they're not going up anything like with the speed of inflation of other
just
things.
on that, I was talking to someone the other day about this, and someone asked me a question on a similar thing like this about if I was worried about the vegan movement. It was again about this and about people moving away from meat and but like the way I see it, the world population's just about doubled in the last 40 years. Another 40 years on from now, where are we going to be as a planet? And the demand, if we keep, for example, planting trees and forgetting about food production and worrying more about the environment, which I get the environment's a serious issue, but if we don't focus on feeding ourselves, we're only ever going to milk so many cows and produce so much red meat based on the land mass. So hopefully in the future, 5, 10, 15 years, the farmer will be the hero and it'll be like, we need you guys producing food.
It could go that way. It could go that if we do a good job of marketing, and it could be about Scotland's farmers being heroes and making some really high-end, really high-quality food that doesn't damage, it's in balance with the environment. At the same time, they're growing nations, and if China and India start to eat the same amount of meat as those countries get richer that we do, then it's kibosh for a lot of us. So there needs to be world balance. We need to really consider the food system, and it is about that. And it does worry me that it is very much driven by very, very powerful capitalist forces.
But I tell you what worries me on that, and you've all touched on it. we could get really good at this, and we will get really good at this. We could have a really positive story to tell. We could have all the compliance with all the rules and regs that we need to. At the end of the day, it all really comes down to what the consumer can afford to pay. We're hearing now about people being plunged into fuel poverty and just the cost of living squeeze out there. Where do we go with that? It's a difficult thing to go and promote ourselves and try and sell ourselves to people who effectively can't afford to buy us, or buy from us, sorry.
Yes, it is a huge conundrum. I would say that looking at it kind of from a historical perspective and where we are now, we are where we are with food prices partly, historically, coming from the war, the way they've been subsidised. We should have long before now made a disconnect there, in that people don't, I think they say it's 10% of your disposable income is food, and if it's any more than that, there's going to be, rioting in the streets, because people see it as qualified food in that percentage and they don't want to pay anymore. But the reality is, I think that, and I'm not saying, Rory, don't stop subsidies. I just think we've got to be smarter on how we subsidise and make the connection with food and make people value food and put it at the heart of what people are living with.
Yeah, Neil's just told us that the return on support on a hectare of wheat going for spirit could pay for X number of nurses' salaries. Even if Neil's figures were a bit kind of back of the envelope type thing. Sorry, Neil, but you did almost say that yourself. There is a return there for government to invest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying it's how you cut your cloth and the policies that we put in place going forward, whether it be, across the board, and acknowledging what certain farmers are doing is, it's just, it goes, the calculator as it stands goes unacknowledged. And I think that this is the opportunity to change that, turn it on its head. When I first started on this road, it was all about, we've got poor land, it's unproductive, we've got sheep on it, they shouldn't be there, and actually, now we're in a place where Scotland should be really looking at itself, in a way that, and I think people's perceptions have completely changed, in terms of how we create and steward our lands to be guardians of the assets that you farmers own or tenant farmers own, or what they do on their land. And I think we're in a place where that can happen. And as Rory said, for a long time maybe we're not quick enough to act on that, and if we don't act on it quite soon, we could find ourselves in a place where other people are continuing to own the assets that we should be stewarding or valuing. Coming back to consumers, we've got a lot of work to do. Ireland hasn't lost that connection, but whereas Scotland, we just, our urban populations really, the lens has only just started to really, through the pandemic, to really turn. Even then, it's a conundrum again, because it's a very middle class thing to say, I'm going to pay for this for my food and blah, blah. There are certain people who possibly, who can't afford, but I think that, again, policy can change that if if our public sector in terms of what we pay for our food or where we choose to source it from, that has a value, and that can also come into play as well. We are at a turning point, but that turning point's been moving quite slowly for quite some time, and I think we really have to get our acts together.
I totally agree, and if they took my support away, by all means, but do it in such a way that my business has the opportunity, at very least, to survive going forward. And I think the real problem is that there's no vision at all at the moment of what it will look like after. It's uncertainty that's driving us. There appears to be no real vision or leadership as to how it's going to go. We can't get behind a national policy because there isn't one. So that needs to happen soon, because all the time we're asleep on the job, somebody else is going to take our market share, and the price of food is global. So whether people can afford it or not, if we are not here and we've covered the whole place in trees, do not think for a minute that the people will have any say in the price of food. There's little enough produce produced in Scotland for it to actually be able to be used and used well, and to fit a world high-value market. I
have to say, I'm with you. I think, and I've been saying this for a long time, and I do bang on about it, we should have a national food strategy map where we know where money, The money that we're investing, our public money, is being used in such a way that we have a network that can take our primary produce, have it converted, and be sold locally. We don't have a vision for that, and I firmly believe that's the way. In terms of local markets, local miles, and we've got the potential to do that. It's just got to be a will.
Neil, you wanted to come in on that.
I was just going to come in and agree with Rory and Marion as well, now that she's spoken a little more, because somebody will fill that vacuum, as we're waiting for a decision, and as we've all pointed out, it's constant investment, farming. You're constantly having to try and keep your business moving, and you're struggling to know just exactly where to point that investment, because there's no direction at the moment, and you think, well, I don't want to take it down a certain channel and find that that's then going to be penalised in a certain way. So I think at the moment, the uncertainty, I would say more than the weather in the market, it's actually everybody's sort of asking, well, where are we going with this? That people are really worried about the future of carbon and environmental, and I think we have to, they say about trees, putting the right tree in the right place. Well, I actually think farming's about that. It's about putting the right crop or the right animal in the right place. And Scotland has an environment over its whole area to put all the right things in all the right place. Now, people have to decide, is that actually what they want? Do they want food production that's homegrown and they're prepared to accept that is being done here and that's what the money's going towards? Or do we just want bog standard, unregulated or lower standard cheap food? We have to decide what we want our public to eat, because the health implications to that will knock on all the way through the chain. It won't, it'll then affect your hospitals and all these other things. The benefits of healthy food, I don't think are maybe recognised quite as much as they could be. That was the point I tried to make to Marie Goujon when she was here. I said, this is the east coast of Scotland. I'm in the southeast. I'm very lucky I have deep, rich soils here. This is where you have to have production. And if you keep making my farm smaller by margins and EFA and then, a cover crop here and a this and that, and take ground out of production, I'm not efficient anymore. I've made massive changes to my business over the years to make it more efficient. And it's been eroded by government policy, not because the market doesn't want what I produce. It's because the government wants some of my ground, and it's making me inefficient. That's the thing I'm most threatened by at the moment. I can only do so much to my business.
I'm really interested to hear that, Neil, because I was going to come at you with a question, again, market focused. You're at the start of one of Scotland's most successful chains. If you look at it from the point of view of your malting barley going into a whiskey bottle and then being sold all over the world, that's a long-established export trade, a long-established earner that is kind of immune to the fact that, and I don't use this lightly, but is immune to the fact that consumers in this country might have less available spend in their pocket. It's been a long-established trade, and yet, you're still sitting here and you're getting, as you said, probably the same for your barley as maybe your father was 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, and I suppose it might be slightly controversial, but I would like a commitment, and it has been tried in the past. The Not in the Spirit campaign and things where there was an actual commitment to Scottish barley being in malting into whiskey, that there was a certain percentage, and they say, you can't do it, you might have a bad harvest, but, I was sort of comparing it to the Champagne region. When they have a bad harvest, there's less bottles. They don't then say, oh, well, we'll buy a whole load of grapes in from somewhere else and just call it Champagne. I think we maybe don't stick up for ourselves maybe quite enough and say, well, look, that would make such a massive difference to our industry to have that backing behind it. It would put that kind of baseline in. And the same with homegrown protein. That's another thing I feel very strongly about as well, and I would like to see a commitment on that as well. Even just reinstating the protein payment that we used to get a long time ago. That kind of thing could encourage guys like myself. I've always grown protein, but there's lots of people around here, who have dabbled and then gone back out, and that nudge would make a massive difference. And so I think the whiskey thing, yes, we I suppose the saying is price takers. We are price takers, and we find it very difficult to get our value through that product, because they say, well, we can bring it in or we can do other things, but it's the risk reward actually that I find difficult with the malt and barley, and I still grow it, so I'm part of the problem probably, but yeah, I just, some years your neighbour growing just bog standard feed, getting a higher tonnage, and you're taking all the risk, and you're maybe risking rejections and having to make sure it's certain quality and things, and you're some years not getting any more for that, and I think it's something that we champion quite a way through the chain, like that should have a better reward.
Rory, you'll come in on that, I'm sure. We've chatted about malting barley before, and I know you're all about getting a better slice of the pie from further up the chain, and also I think you probably want to come in on the protein thing there as well, because that's probably a big part of your business.
Yeah, I can make comment on all those things. What I think though is about we need to be relevant, and we need to make ourselves relevant to the people and to government. Now, Nicola Sturgeon champions the well-being economy. One of the key things that drives people's well-being is their health. One of the big drags on the economy at the moment is people's health. And as our nation gets fatter and older, it's going to become even more difficult to sustain our economy. And if our health is getting worse, our well-being gets worse. What is absolutely at the root of good health is good food. And food is effectively medicine. Now, there are plenty of studies done, and I can't remember the numbers, but if you could change and improve the diet, the cost of diabetes to the NHS comes down. The cost of obesity-related disease comes down. You attach the relevance of what British, Scottish farming does to that cost and to that well-being of our nation, then you build a nation from the ground up, literally from farming up to having good well-being. Because it's our food system that, I argue, it is our food system that's driving our economy. So we need to make ourselves relevant. And if they think we're relevant, then you'll get a payment for your malt and barley or your protein. Because if that protein can be shown that it's relevant to society, to have little white things that can convert hillside poor forage into high quality protein without the need for soya, then you start to become relevant. So high quality protein on the hills of Scotland, and high quality fat and protein from the fields of southwest Scotland in the way of milk. And if the chocolate that Marion makes, or the confectionery that Marion makes, is made with Scottish sugar beet and fat and milk from southwest Scotland, and all of that's relevant, then you can start to add value. But all the time we're making arguments, and if you said it, Cammy, we're moaning. Well, you've got to deliver relevance and positivity together. And I genuinely think the food system is at the key. And there's been no discussion, in fact there's very little discussion about how we will deliver this well-being economy. You start with your land and your food system. And you can't have, it can't be wise to cover your good land and not grow good Scottish food in it while we leave a hillside unattended. As
a wee kind of aside on that, I've just been doing some work looking at a business, an agricultural business in East Lothian that was started in the year 1782. And that business was started at the time where there was massive improvements going on in Scottish agriculture. It was the time of agricultural enlightenment. And one of the things I stumbled upon was just, that was 1782, but just prior to that was when potatoes first were grown in the fields of East Lothian. That was the first, field scale potato crops. And the line that came out of it, now I can't quote it word for word, but it was something like, and there was great delight for the peasants. Now, obviously we don't talk about the peasants in that sense now, but the point being it was relevant. Suddenly at that point, what was actually happening on the farms became, as Rory would say, relevant to the population. And the population stopped having to, grow on the old run rig system and try and, feed themselves. They were able to then go and take other professions, to do other things. Now, that was a huge relevance, because at that time Scottish farmers became the heroes. That's 240 years ago, I suppose. So it's a bit of a climb to go back to that. But maybe with YouTube it can come again, Cammy, and we can start to be relevant and heroes again.
Well, when I was saying about like farmers being heroes again, part of me is like, yeah, that'd be good, but part of as well, it'd be quite sad that it would almost be through desperation that the world realises actually we're running short of food here.
So, I hope you enjoyed listening to our distinguished guests as much as I did. But there's more to come. Join us next time when we'll come back with part 2 of our guest evening. So that's it from me, and bye for now.